Hyen stood before the largest gathering of species in the known galaxy. The council chamber stretched so wide that the far walls disappeared into artificial mist, a design meant to make every species feel equally small before the collective wisdom of 10,000 worlds. He had rehearsed his presentation 100 times, but now his hands trembled as he activated the holographic display. The star map bloomed between the assembled delegates like a flower made of light. Blue lines connected thousands of systems in an intricate web of trade routes and territorial boundaries. Every species present could trace their homeworld on this map, could follow the paths their ancestors had traveled to reach the stars. This map represented 3,000 years of exploration, warfare, diplomacy, and expansion, but there was a hole in it. "Honored delegates," Hyen began, his voice amplified across the chamber. "For my entire career as a cartographer, I have studied our maps. I have traced every border, verified every coordinate, and documented every territorial claim. And I have always wondered about this." He gestured, and the map zoomed toward a region on what humans would call the Galactic East. A perfect sphere of empty space sat like a wound in the fabric of civilization. No trade routes crossed it. No territorial claims marked it. The official designation read simply, Restricted Zone 7. This region, Hyen continued, contains approximately 400 star systems. Preliminary surveys from centuries ago indicate at least 70 habitable worlds, countless resource deposits and strategic positions that would be invaluable to dozens of species in this chamber. Yet for 300 years, every species has avoided it. Not because of natural hazards, not because of competing claims, but because of a restriction that appears in no legal database, follows no standard protocol, and offers no explanation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Hyen noticed something odd. The sound was not confusion or curiosity. It was discomfort. The delegates were shifting in their seats, appendages, or hover platforms. They knew something. "I have requested access to the historical records," Hyen pressed on. "Every request has been denied without explanation. I have asked senior members of the Cartography Guild why this zone exists. They refuse to discuss it. I've even tried to access survey data from automated probes, and I discovered that those files have been deleted from every archive. So I come before you today to ask a simple question. What is in Restricted Zone 7, and why can no one speak about it?" The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush worlds. Finally, a delegate from the Vrelnari Concordat rose. The Vrelnari were an old species, their civilization ancient when most others were still discovering fire. The delegate's crystalline form refracted light in nervous patterns. "Young cartographer," the Vrelnari said slowly, "some boundaries exist not because of law, but because of wisdom. Your question is not forbidden, but the answer is not one we speak casually." "Then speak it seriously," Hyen replied. "I am not a child. I deserve to know why my maps have a hole in them." Another delegate stood, this one a Kelthari, a species known for strategic thinking and military precision. "Because 300 years ago we learned a lesson. A lesson purchased with 40,000 ships and billions of lives. We learned that some species should be left alone." "What species?" Hyen demanded. The Kelthari delegate's voice dropped to barely a whisper, but in the perfect acoustics of the chamber, everyone heard. "The humans." The word fell like a stone into still water, ripples of reaction spreading through the assembled species. Hyen looked around in confusion. He had never heard this word before. It appeared in no database he could access. But clearly, everyone else in this room knew exactly what it meant. "I don't understand," Hyen said. "Who are the humans?" An elder from the Palathian Assembly, a species whose members lived for centuries, slowly rose. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed history rather than read about it. "The humans," she said carefully, "are the species who taught the galaxy the difference between strength and power. They are the reason Restricted Zone 7 exists. And they are the reason we do not speak of that region, because to speak of it is to remember what happened when we entered it uninvited." "But," Hyen started. "No," the elder cut him off. Do not ask about the humans, young one. Do not question the boundary. Do not wonder why the maps end where they end. Some knowledge is not meant to be pursued. Hyan felt frustration building in his chest. He had devoted his life to understanding the galaxy, to creating accurate maps, to answering questions. And now he was being told that there was a question he should not ask? That's not good enough, he said quietly. You're telling me that an entire sector of space is off limits because of one species, and I'm just supposed to accept it? What gives them the right to claim so much territory? What makes them so dangerous that the entire galactic community is afraid of them? The Palathian elder's expression was unreadable, but her next words were clear. They do not claim the territory. We gave it to them. And it is not fear that keeps us away, it is respect for a lesson we never wish to learn again. This discussion is over. The council moved to vote on Hyan's petition for information access. The result was unanimous. Denied. Not a single delegate voted to open the historical records. Hyan stood there, his holographic map still glowing. The empty sphere of Restricted Zone 7 mocking him with its BLANKNESS dot as the delegates began to file out. Hyan felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Bora, a senior researcher from the archives of known civilizations. She was older than Hyan by several decades, her face marked by years of study and contemplation. Walk with me, she said quietly. They left the council chamber and entered one of the quieter corridors of Nexus Prime Station. Bora waited until they were alone before speaking. I have been studying xenanthropology for 40 years, she said. I have dedicated my life to understanding how different species think, how they organize themselves, how they view the universe. And in all that time, I have found exactly 7 references to humans in the databases I can access, 7 in 40 years of research. Do you know what that tells me? That someone is hiding something, Hyan replied. No, Bora shook her head. That someone is hiding everything. The only way to erase a species so completely from galactic memory is if every major power agreed to do it simultaneously. That level of coordination is almost impossible unless they were all terrified of what would happen if they didn't cooperate. A third voice added. Both Hyan and Bora turned to see Jiwan, a diplomat known throughout the council for her curiosity and her habit of asking uncomfortable questions. She had voted for Hyan's petition, one of only 3 delegates to do so before changing her vote under pressure. I have been in diplomatic service for 20 years, Jiwan said. I have negotiated treaties, prevented wars, and mediated disputes between species that hated each other for millennia. And in all that time, I have never seen the entire council agree on something so completely and so quickly. Whatever happened 300 years ago, it scared them enough that they are still scared today. Hen looked between the 2 women. So what do we do? Bora smiled slightly. We do what researchers do. We find out the truth. And I'll handle any diplomatic problems that arise from you 2 poking around in classified archives, Jiwan added. The 3 of them stood in that corridor, the lights of Nexus Prime reflecting off the station's massive viewports, the stars beyond holding secrets that the galaxy had decided to forget. But Hyan had never been good at leaving questions unanswered. Neither had Bora, and Jiwan had made a career out of pushing boundaries. Whatever the truth about humans was, they were going to find it, even if the galaxy didn't want them to. The restricted archives existed in a part of Nexus Prime that most beings never visited. 3 levels below the main diplomatic floors, behind doors that required clearances most officials would never receive. The accumulated secrets of galactic civilization sat in crystalline storage matrices. Bora had spent years building relationships with the archivists, earning trust through careful research and respect for proper protocols. Now she was about to abuse every bit of that trust. This is incredibly illegal, she whispered as her credentials opened the first security door. Hyan and Jiwan followed close behind, their own forged access codes loaded into temporary passes that Jiwan had acquired through channels she refused to discuss. Then let's be quick about it, Jiwan replied, her eyes constantly scanning for security patrols. The archive halls stretched in every direction. filled with data storage units that hummed quietly in the controlled atmosphere. Bora led them deeper, past sections labeled with dates going back thousands of years, past entire wings dedicated to wars and peace treaties, past the recorded history of species long extinct. Finally, they reached a section marked with warning symbols in 17 different languages. The date range read 25472-552 Galactic Standard Calendar. 300 years ago exactly. This is it, Bora said, her hands already working on the access panel. This 5-year period is almost completely redacted from public records. Everything from this era requires special council permission to access. Can you get in? Hyan asked. Bora's fingers danced across the interface. The question isn't whether I can get in. The question is whether they'll know we were here. I'm using an old maintenance backdoor that should buy us maybe an hour before security systems flag the access. The panel flashed green. The storage unit opened with a soft hiss. Inside were thousands of data fragments, most of them corrupted or deliberately damaged. But some remained intact. Bora began pulling files, projecting them into the air where all three could see. The first file was a military assessment from the Vrelnari Concordat, dated 302 years ago. Hyan read aloud. Initial contact with species designation human achieved at coordinates. They possess basic faster-than-light capability and moderate energy weapons technology. Preliminary xenological assessment indicates a young species, highly emotional, poor strategic thinking, physically inferior to most spacefaring species. Homeworld designated Earth shows vulnerability to standard orbital siege tactics. Military command estimates total subjugation achievable within 6 standard weeks with minimal resource expenditure. They plan to invade? Jiwan said quietly. They made first contact and immediately decided to conquer them. Bora pulled up another file, this one from the Kalthari Strategic Command. It detailed the formation of an invasion alliance. 7 major species had agreed to split human territory between them. The human homeworld system contained valuable heavy metals and rare elements. The humans themselves were to be incorporated into the workforce of whichever species claimed which territories. 40,000 ships, Hyan read from a fleet manifest. They sent 40,000 warships. That's larger than any single species fleet in the current galactic military. They were planning genocide. Not genocide, Bora corrected quietly. Slavery. In their minds, they were being merciful by letting the humans survive as laborers. The next file showed the invasion's launch. Confident reports from fleet commanders. Predictions of quick victory. Some commanders were already arguing about how to divide the spoils. The humans had sent desperate diplomatic transmissions, offering peace, offering to share resources, offering anything to avoid war. Every offer was ignored. Then the files became strange. A transmission from the fleet's lead admiral, sent just 3 days after crossing into human territory. Human resistance more determined than anticipated. They are defending every world with unusual ferocity. Recommend increasing assault forces by 20%. 2 days later, human tactics unpredictable. They are using their own damaged ships as weapons, ramming our vessels. This is not standard warfare. Requesting psychological analysis of human combat doctrine. 5 days later, we have taken their colony world Arcturus. 3. Human military forces refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. They fought to the last individual. Civilian population engaged in resistance activities. This species does not understand when they are beaten. The reports grew increasingly frantic. The confident tone of the early days disappeared, replaced by confusion and then fear. Human fleets were smaller and less advanced, but they fought with a determination that made no strategic sense. They sacrificed expensive warships to damage single enemy vessels. They boarded enemy ships in hand-to-hand combat using primitive kinetic weapons. They turned asteroids into missiles and colony stations into bombs. Listen to this, Jiwan said, highlighting a report from a Kalthari battle analyst. Human combat doctrine appears to be based on the assumption that every conflict is existential. They fight every battle as if losing means extinction. They accept casualty rates that would cause any rational species to surrender. Recommended revision: humans are not rational by galactic standards. They are willing to die to an extent that makes victory calculations meaningless. Hyon pulled up a tactical assessment that made his blood run cold. The invasion force lost 6,000 ships in the first month. By month 3, they had lost 20,000. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were winning through sheer refusal to stop fighting. Bora found a file that had been marked for deletion but somehow survived. It was a communication from one of the invasion fleet's senior commanders to the Galactic Council. Sent during the 4th month of the war, we have made a catastrophic error. The humans are not like us. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They do not weigh strategic value against cost. When we destroyed one of their worlds, we thought they would surrender. Instead, every surviving human became our enemy. When we captured their soldiers, we thought they would provide intelligence. Instead, they refused to speak even under interrogation. When we offered them surrender terms, they responded with a counteroffer: leave their space immediately or face total war. We laughed at them. We should not have laughed. I am requesting full council authorization to retreat. This species will destroy us before they allow themselves to be conquered. The request was denied. The council ordered the invasion to continue. Then came the final reports. Most were fragments, corrupted beyond full recovery. But the pieces that remained painted a picture of complete military collapse. The human fleets, now more experienced and ruthless, had stopped defending and started attacking. They struck at supply lines, command ships, and staging areas. They learned to use their enemies' tactics against them and then developed new tactics. Their enemies couldn't counter. The largest intact file was a distress signal from the invasion fleet's flagship. It had been transmitted on 93 different frequencies simultaneously. In every major galactic language, Bora played it. The voice was of Relnari Admiral, one whose crystalline form was fracturing from stress in the video feed. To all ships. To all forces. Immediate retreat order. Leave human space immediately. Do not engage. Do not attempt rescue operations. The humans have. They have boarded the flagship. They are not killing us quickly. They are taking prisoners. They are making us watch what they do to the command staff. This is not warfare. This is a message. Do not engage the humans. Retreat, retreat. They are not like. The transmission cut off. The 3 of them stood in silence for a long moment. How many ships returned? Hyon finally asked. Bora checked the casualty reports. Of 40,000 ships, 12 made it back to galactic space. And every survivor was. The files say they were psychologically compromised. Most couldn't serve again. Some took their own lives. Others just kept saying the same things over and over. What things? Do you want to ask? Bora pulled up a psychiatric evaluation. The patient was a Kelthari tactical officer. The report noted that he would not stop drawing geometric patterns and muttering calculations. When asked what he was calculating, he would only say, trying to find the equation that makes them stop. There has to be a way to make them stop? Another file showed a Palathian engineer who had survived by hiding in an escape pod for 3 weeks. When recovered, she would only repeat one phrase: they made us understand. They made us understand what we did. Hyon found a final file, dated 6 months after the invasion began. It was a transmission from human space to the Galactic Council. The message was simple and clear. We have destroyed your invasion fleet. We have kept some of your leaders alive as witnesses. They will be returned to you so they can explain what happens when you threaten humanity with extinction. We did not want this war. You forced it upon us. Now we are giving you a choice. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. We will remain in our space. You will remain in yours. We will never speak of this war again. But if any species crosses our boundary, if anyone threatens us again, we will not show the mercy we have shown today. There will be no warnings, no negotiations, no survivors. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Choose wisely. The Galactic Council had voted within hours to establish the restricted zone. No debate. No discussion. Unanimous agreement. The psychiatric facility on Kalmara existed in a region of space, so remote that most navigation charts listed it simply as Medical Research Station without elaboration. Jiwon's diplomatic credentials got them through the outer security, but her hands were shaking as she presented their authorization codes to the facility director. "You want to interview the witnesses?" the director said flatly. It wasn't a question. The director was a Quelrani, a species known for their emotional sensitivity and their excellence in psychiatric care. Her compound eyes regarded the three visitors with something between pity and concern. "Do you understand what you're asking?" "We need to know the truth," Hyan said. "The historical files are incomplete. The survivors are the only ones who can tell us what really happened." The director's head tilted in a gesture that might have been a sigh. "The survivors can't tell you what happened. They can only tell you what broke them. There's a difference." She paused, mandibles clicking softly. "Most of them are dead now. 300 years is a long time, even for a long-lived species. We have 3 remaining patients who were present during the human conflict. 2 are kept in medically induced comas because their waking hours are filled with episodes we cannot control. The 3rd is functional, mostly, but he has not spoken a coherent sentence in 2 centuries. Can we see them?" Bora asked gently. "Please. The galaxy has hidden this for too long. People deserve to know." The director studied them for a long moment. "Very well. But I must warn you, exposure to their trauma can be contagious in its own way. Some truths, once known, cannot be unknown." She led them through sterile white corridors that smelled of antiseptic and something else, something that Hyan couldn't identify but that made his skin crawl. They passed rooms with reinforced doors and small windows. Through one he glimpsed a Palathian rocking back and forth, drawing something on the walls with her own blood. "That one was a strategic analyst during the war," the director said quietly. "She tries to calculate defense scenarios that would have worked against the humans. She's been trying for 300 years. She never finds one that satisfies her." They stopped at a room where a Vrelnari floated in a suspension tank, his crystalline body shot through with dark fractures. "Admiral Kelver," the director introduced. "He commanded the 2nd wave of the invasion fleet. He is one of the witnesses the humans returned to us." The Admiral's eyes opened when they entered. They were cloudy, but awareness flickered in them. The director activated a communication interface, and the Admiral's voice emerged, distorted and slow. "You want to know about the humans," he said without preamble. "Everyone who comes here wants to know. They see the files. They see the numbers. Ships lost. Systems destroyed. They think they understand. They don't understand? Help us understand," Jiwon said softly. The Admiral's form rippled, color shifting across his fractured surface. "We had every advantage. Better weapons. Better shields. Better tactics. We had studied warfare for thousands of years across hundreds of campaigns. The humans had been in space for barely a century. We thought it would be simple." He paused, and when he continued, his voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "They didn't fight to win territory. They didn't fight for resources. They fought to make sure we would never fight them again. Every engagement was designed not just to defeat us, but to teach us. To make us understand that attacking them was a mistake we should never repeat." "But you had superior numbers," Hyan interjected. "Superior technology." "Technology means nothing," the Admiral said, his voice hardening, "when your enemy doesn't care about surviving. We would destroy one of their ships, and the crew would eject in pods and float toward our vessels. We thought they were surrendering. They weren't. They had weapons. Primitive kinetic weapons that our shields barely registered as threats. They would breach our hulls in void suits and kill trained soldiers with tools that belonged in a museum." The Admiral's colors shifted to something dark and pained. "We captured one of their colony worlds. We thought if we held their civilians, they would negotiate. Instead, the civilians fought us. Children, elders, everyone. They used farming equipment as weapons. They sabotaged our supplies. They sent false signals that led our ships into traps. We couldn't understand it. In any civilized warfare, civilians are neutral. Human civilians are combatants who haven't been given uniforms yet. Bora leaned forward. What changed? How did the war end? We started winning, the Admiral said, and his voice was hollow. Or we thought we were. We had taken 4 of their worlds. We had destroyed half their fleet. Their remaining forces were scattered, and then they changed tactics. They stopped defending and started hunting. They learned our patrol patterns. They tracked our supply lines. They found our command ships. And they stopped taking prisoners except for the commanding officers. His voice dropped even lower. They boarded my flagship. I watched them cut through my security forces like they weren't even there. Not because they were better equipped, they weren't. Because they fought like every single one of them had accepted death before the battle even started. How do you fight someone who treats warfare as religious obligation? How do you negotiate with someone who views peace as a temporary state between conflicts? They brought me to their ship, the Admiral continued. Me and the other senior commanders. We thought they would torture us for information. We were wrong. They did something worse. What did they do? Hyan asked, though part of him didn't want to know. They made us understand, the Admiral said simply. They had technology we didn't know they possessed? Memory sharing? Neural interfacing? They connected us to recordings of every soldier who had died in the war. Every human soldier. And they made us experience their final moments. Every fear. Every pain. Every last thought. Thousands of them. We felt ourselves die thousands of times. The room was completely silent except for the hum of medical equipment. It took days, the Admiral whispered. Days of experiencing death after death. And when it was over, they did something even worse. They let us go. They sent us back to our fleets with a message. Now you know what you've done. Now you know the cost of your arrogance. Go home. Tell them what happens when you threaten humanity with extinction. Tell them we will never let it happen again. No, the Admiral's voice was firm despite its weakness. Torture would have been kinder. This was education. They wanted us to understand not just that we had lost, but why we had lost. We had treated war as mathematics. Resources versus resources. Technology versus technology. They treated war as existential struggle. They fought like every battle was the last battle their species would ever fight. The director touched Hyun's shoulder. That's enough for today. The Admiral needs rest. But the Admiral spoke one more time before they left. The humans didn't want to destroy us. They wanted to make sure we would destroy ourselves if we ever tried to fight them again. And they succeeded. Half the commanders they released couldn't live with what they had felt. The other half dedicated their lives to making sure such orders were never given again. I am here because I couldn't do either. I just remember forever. They moved to the next room, where a Kelthari tactical officer sat in a chair, staring at a wall covered in mathematical equations. The director explained that he had been writing equations for centuries, trying to find a tactical solution that would have defeated the humans. There isn't one, the Kelthari said suddenly, not looking away from his wall. I've calculated every scenario, every possible strategic approach. There is no combination of technology, tactics, or numbers that defeats an enemy that treats warfare as absolute commitment. They don't calculate acceptable losses. They don't weigh cost versus benefit. They simply fight until they win or until they're extinct. There's no equation for that. His voice was clinical, detached, as if he were discussing weather patterns rather than warfare. The mistake wasn't tactical. It was philosophical. We thought of war as an extension of politics. They think of war as an extension of survival. We were playing chess. They were fighting for their lives. You can't win chess against someone who is willing to flip the board and fight with the pieces. The third patient was the Palathian engineer they had read about in the files. She was conscious but mostly unresponsive, sitting in a corner of her room and rocking slowly. When the director asked if she would speak to them, the Prolethean's eyes focused for just a moment. "They made us watch," she said, her voice cracking. "After we surrendered, after the war was over, they made the commanders watch what they did to the leaders who ordered the invasion. They didn't kill them. They made them feel, made them understand. Every death, every destroyed home, every orphaned child, they connected them to all of it and made them live with it. Some of those commanders are still alive, still serving, still carrying that weight. The humans wanted them to. They wanted witnesses who would never let the galaxy forget." She started rocking again, her voice dropping to a mumble. "They weren't cruel. That's what people don't understand. Cruelty would have been simpler. This was justice. Personal, intimate, inescapable justice. And somehow that was worse." As they left the facility, none of them spoke for a long time. Finally, on the shuttle back to Nexus Prime, Jawan broke the silence. Hyan couldn't let it go. Every night for 2 weeks after they returned from Kalmara, he would stare at the map of Restricted Zone 7, at that perfect sphere of empty space that represented humanity's territory. The historical files spoke of a species that fought with determination bordering on insanity. The survivors spoke of psychological warfare and existential commitment, but none of it seemed real. It was history, ancient history by galactic standards. Surely 300 years would have changed them. Surely the stories were exaggerated. He told himself these things as he modified a small scout ship in one of Nexus Prime's public docks. He told himself this was scientific curiosity, not obsession. He was a cartographer. His job was to fill in empty spaces on maps. That's all he was doing. Bora found him on the third day of modifications. She stood at the entrance to the dock bay, her expression carefully neutral. "You're planning to go there," she said. Not a question. Hyan didn't look up from the sensor array he was installing. "I need to see for myself. The files could be propaganda. The survivors could be delusional. 300 years is a long time. Maybe the humans have changed. Maybe they're not what we've been told. Or maybe they're exactly what we've been told, and you're about to make a catastrophic mistake." "I'm not going to make contact," Hyan insisted. "I'm just going to observe from the boundary. Send a probe across maybe. Take some readings. Confirm that the zone is actually occupied. That's all." Bora was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. "I'm coming with you. If you're going to do something this stupid, you need a witness." Over the next 2 days, 3 more people joined what Hyan was starting to think of as a dangerously foolish expedition. Jiwon came because someone needed to handle diplomatic consequences if things went wrong. A young technician named Danby volunteered because she had family members who had disappeared near the boundary decades ago and wanted answers. And a senior pilot named Minho joined because, as he put it, someone needs to make sure you idiots actually make it to the boundary and back. The journey to the edge of human space took 4 days. They traveled through well-established trade routes at first, then through increasingly remote systems. Other ships became less frequent. Space stations disappeared. By the 3rd day, they were in regions where the star charts were centuries old and marked as unverified. On the 4th day, they reached the boundary. It wasn't marked by any physical barrier. There was no wall, no energy field, no obvious demarcation. But every sensor on the ship registered the change. Space itself seemed different here, though Hyan couldn't explain how. It was like standing at the edge of a forest and knowing somehow that predators lived in the darkness beyond the first trees. "Look at this," Danby said from her station. Her screens were lit up with contacts. There are thousands of them. Monitoring stations, satellites, automated platforms. They're everywhere, watching every possible approach vector. Minho brought up a tactical display. The boundary was ringed with sensor arrays, each one sophisticated enough to detect a ship's approach from millions of kilometers away. "This isn't a defense network," he said slowly. "This is a warning system. They're not trying to keep us out. They're making sure they know when someone comes in. Bora activated the communication systems and immediately detected broadcasts. Thousands of them, all transmitting the same message in hundreds of languages. She played it through the ship's speakers. Turn back. This is your only warning. We do not wish you harm, but we will not allow you to harm us. Cross this boundary and you accept the consequences. There will be no negotiations. No second chances. Turn back, the message repeated, calm and clear, in a dozen different voices speaking a dozen different languages. It wasn't threatening. It was matter of fact, like a safety warning on dangerous machinery. We should listen to it, Jiwon said quietly. We have our answer. The zone is occupied. They're monitoring it. We can go back and report what we found. But Hyun was staring at his instruments, at the perfect grid of monitoring stations, at the careful precision of their placement. His scientific mind was screaming questions. What technology were they using? How did they maintain such a vast network? What was on the other side? One probe, he said. We send one probe just across the boundary, just far enough to take readings. That's not a threat. It's just information gathering. Hyun, Bora started. It's harmless, Hyun insisted. A small probe. No weapons. Just sensors. If they're really monitoring this boundary as carefully as it seems, they'll detect it and disable it. We'll have our answer about their technical capabilities and we'll leave. That's all. He could see the doubt in everyone's eyes, but no one stopped him as he prepared a small survey probe. It was barely larger than his hand, equipped with basic sensors and a simple transmitter. Nothing that could be construed as hostile, he launched it. The probe crossed the boundary, traveling at a leisurely pace, broadcasting peaceful intentions in every frequency it could manage, for 30 seconds. Nothing happened. Then their sensors registered something impossible. A ship appeared directly in front of the probe, less than a kilometer from their position. Not through any visible FTL emergence, not from behind an asteroid or debris field. It was simply there, as if it had been waiting in a dimension they couldn't detect. The human ship was small, perhaps suited for a crew of 20. It was functional rather than elegant, built for purpose rather than aesthetic. But its presence on their sensors felt enormous, like a predator that had been sleeping and had just opened its eyes. A communication channel opened. The voice was human, female, speaking their language with perfect fluency and no accent. You were warned. Your probe has been disabled and will be returned to you. You have 30 seconds to retreat beyond the boundary. If you cross again, you will not receive another warning. We will not chase you. We will not negotiate. We will simply ensure you are no longer a threat. This is not arrogance. This is experience. The probe appeared on their external cameras, floating gently back toward their ship, completely powered down but undamaged. The human ship had disabled it without destroying it. A precision that spoke to technical capabilities far beyond what they had expected. Move us back, Jawan ordered Minho. Now, Minho didn't need to be told twice. The ship's engines fired, pushing them away from the boundary at maximum safe speed. The human ship didn't follow. It simply watched, its sensors tracking their retreat, but Danby, sitting at her maintenance station, had been recording everything with personal equipment. She had been trying to get a glimpse inside the human ship through sensor reflections and camera angles. For just a moment, a lucky glitch in their passive sensors gave her a view. She froze. The crew, Danby whispered. I saw inside their ship. Just for a second? And? They weren't in uniform. They weren't at battle stations. They were... She pulled up the recording, enhancing the brief image. They were playing cards, laughing. One of them was eating something. They detected an intrusion into their space. Dispatched a ship, disabled our probe, and delivered an ultimatum. And then they just went back to whatever they were doing like it was nothing. Hyun stared at the image. She was right. Through the brief sensor glitch, he could see 3 humans visible in what appeared to be a common area. They were relaxed, casual, going about their day. The one who had spoken to them was probably back there now, shuffling cards or finishing a meal. They weren't warriors, Minho said slowly. Or rather, they were, but they weren't. This wasn't a military patrol. This was just whoever was nearest to the boundary when we crossed. And they responded like it was a routine task. The implications hit them all at once. The human ship had appeared instantly at their exact location. It had disabled their probe without damaging it. It had delivered its warning and waited to confirm compliance. And the crew treated it as casually as checking a mailbox. Every single one of them, Bora whispered. The story said that during the war, every human fought like a trained soldier. We thought that meant they had universal military service or some kind of cultural warrior tradition. But that's not it. Every human can fight like that. It's not their soldiers we were seeing. It's all of them. Farmers, artists, engineers, parents, every single one of them is capable of this. Jiwan was pulling up population estimates for human space based on the old survey data. If every one of them is like this, if every civilian can respond like a military unit, we're not talking about a species with a strong military. We're talking about a species where the distinction between civilian and military doesn't really exist. Hyen felt his earlier confidence crumbling. He had thought the stories were exaggerated. He had thought 3 centuries would have softened them, made them more like other civilized species. He had been wrong. We need to go back, he said quietly. We need to tell the council what we've learned. What have we learned? Danby asked. That everything the survivors told us was true. That the quarantine isn't to protect humanity from us, but to protect us from giving them a reason to do what they did 300 years ago? No one had an answer for that. They sat in silence as Minho guided the ship away from the boundary, the human vessel watching them go but making no move to follow. It didn't need to follow. Its message had been delivered and understood. The decision to go public was not made lightly. For 3 days after their return, Hyen, Bora, and Jiwan debated in Jiwan's quarters on Nexus Prime. They had evidence that contradicted 3 centuries of enforced silence. They had proof that the galaxy had hidden an entire species from public knowledge. And they had first-hand experience of humanity's continued vigilance. If we reveal this, there will be panic, Bora argued, playing the role of skeptic even though Hyen knew she agreed with disclosure. Species will demand military action. They'll see humans as an existential threat that needs to be contained or eliminated. And if we stay silent, Jiwan countered. How long before someone else stumbles across the boundary? How long before a species that doesn't know the history makes contact without understanding what they're risking? In the end, it was Danby who convinced them. The young technician had lost an uncle to a survey mission that had vanished near the boundary 40 years ago. No one had ever explained what happened. His family had been told it was a navigational error, a tragic accident. But now Danby knew the truth. Her uncle had probably crossed the boundary and met the same fate as the ancient invasion fleet. People deserve to know, Danby said quietly. Not knowing doesn't make us safer. It just makes us ignorant. Jiwan used her diplomatic privileges to call for an open council session. The request was unusual enough that it couldn't be refused without drawing suspicion. Within 2 days, the council chamber was filled with delegates from across the galaxy. The gallery seats packed with observers and media representatives. The mood was curious rather than concerned. Most assumed this would be another routine diplomatic matter. Perhaps a border dispute or trade negotiation. Jiwan stood before them all. Her hand steady despite the weight of what she was about to do. Honored delegates, she began. I come before you today to discuss Restricted Zone 7. The region you know as empty space on every official map. I come to tell you about the species that inhabits that space. I come to tell you about humans. The reaction was immediate. Half the chamber erupted in protests and calls for her to stop speaking. The other half went completely silent, as if afraid that even breathing too loudly might draw unwanted attention. The elder delegates, those who had lived through the war or knew its history, looked stricken, but Jiwan had the floor, and by council rules, She had the right to speak. She told them everything. The invasion 300 years ago. The 40,000 ships sent to conquer a young species. The complete military disaster that followed. The psychological warfare that broke even the survivors. The boundary that had been established not by human demand but by galactic fear. She showed them the files from the archives. She played recordings from the surviving witnesses. She displayed the sensor logs from their recent expedition to the boundary. And she explained in clear and simple terms that the galaxy had spent 3 centuries hiding from a species that wanted nothing more than to be left alone. "We have made humans into a myth," Jawan said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "We have turned them into monsters in stories we tell ourselves to justify our fear. But the truth is simpler and more humbling. We attacked them. They defended themselves. They won. And then they let us go with a warning, never again. That is not the behavior of monsters. That is the behavior of a species that understands the cost of war and chooses peace when possible." The chamber descended into chaos. Delegates were shouting, arguing, demanding that Jawan be silenced or arrested. Some called for immediate military mobilization. Others insisted that the boundary be reinforced and expanded. A few, very few, sat in thoughtful silence. The chaos continued for hours. The council broke into factions, each arguing for different responses. Some wanted to pretend nothing had changed, to continue the policy of silence. Others wanted to open negotiations with humanity. Still others wanted to prepare for what they saw as an inevitable conflict. Then something happened that no one expected. An alert rippled through Nexus Prime's traffic control. A ship was approaching, broadcasting human identification codes. A human ship was coming to Nexus Prime for the first time in 300 years. The chamber fell silent. Every screen, every display, every viewport turned to show the approaching vessel. It was larger than the patrol ship they had encountered at the boundary, clearly designed for long-range travel and diplomatic functions. But it moved with the same quiet confidence, as if it had every right to be there. The ship docked without incident. Nexus Prime security forces surrounded the docking bay, but they didn't know what to do. Should they treat this as an invasion? A diplomatic visit? First contact with a species everyone knew existed but pretended didn't? A single human emerged from the ship. He was middle-aged by human standards, wearing simple but formal clothing in dark colors. His hair was black with hints of gray, and his expression was calm. He carried no visible weapons, no ceremonial objects. Nothing but himself. He walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime as security forces parted before him. Not out of fear, but out of complete uncertainty about protocol. He entered the council chamber, where thousands of beings fell silent at his appearance. "My name is Taiyang," he said, his voice clear and unaccented in the common galactic language. "I am an ambassador from humanity. We have been monitoring your discussions about us. We felt it was time we spoke for ourselves." The council's senior chairman, a Vrelnari elder, found his voice. "You have no right to address this body. Humanity has no diplomatic standing in. We have the right of any species to speak in our own defense." Taiyang interrupted gently but firmly. "You have spent 3 centuries discussing us, judging us, and fearing us. Perhaps it is time you listen to us." No one moved to stop him as he walked to the center of the chamber, the space usually reserved for formal petitions and addresses. 300 years ago, Taiyang began, my people were young in the galaxy. We had just achieved faster-than-light travel. We were excited to meet other civilizations, to learn, to trade, to share what we had discovered. The first species we met were the Vrelnari. We offered friendship. They offered us a choice, serve them or be destroyed. He let that hang in the air for a moment. We chose a third option. We fought, not because we wanted to, but because you gave us no alternative. We fought with everything we had, with a desperation born of knowing that if we lost, our entire species would be enslaved or extinct. And we won. Not because we were stronger, but because we refused to accept defeat. Taiyang's expression remained calm, but his words carried weight. After the war, we faced a choice. We could pursue our enemies into galactic space, could wage a campaign of revenge for the billions of our people who died defending our homes. Or we could let you go, let you carry the message back that humanity would not be conquered. We chose mercy. We chose to give you the chance to learn from your mistake. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from a dozen different species. And you learned? You established the boundary? You stayed away. You respected our space. For 300 years, we have lived in peace because both sides kept their word. You didn't threaten us. We didn't threaten you. But now the silence has been broken, Taiyang continued. Now you know we still exist, that we're still watching, still ready, and you're afraid. Some of you want to destroy us before we can destroy you. Others want to negotiate from a position of strength you don't actually have. Still others want to go back to pretending we don't exist. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less clear. Let me offer you a better option. We do not want your territory. We do not covet your resources. We do not care about your politics or your disputes. We want what we have always wanted, to be left alone to live our lives in peace. But we also understand that 300 years of silence has created more fear than communication ever would have. Taiyang gestured broadly. So we propose this, end the quarantine. Establish a neutral zone where trade and cultural exchange can occur. Allow diplomatic relations to develop naturally. Let our peoples meet as individuals rather than as faceless threats. We will share our technology, our culture, our perspective. In return, we ask only for what we asked 300 years ago. Respect our sovereignty, and we will respect yours. Taiyang's expression didn't change. Then the boundary remains, and both sides lose the opportunity to benefit from peaceful contact. We will not force ourselves on you. But understand this. If anyone attempts to test our defenses again, if anyone treats humanity as a target for conquest or subjugation, we will respond as we did 300 years ago. Not with threats or warnings, but with complete commitment to our own survival. That is not arrogance. That is simply the truth. He looked directly at Heian, who was sitting in the gallery. Young cartographer, you wanted to fill in the empty space on your maps. Let me help you. Human space contains 263 inhabited worlds, 4 billion people, 17 major nations, and countless cultural groups. We are scientists, artists, farmers, engineers. We are individuals with hopes and dreams and families. We are not monsters. We are simply a species that learned the hard way that survival requires both the strength to defend ourselves and the wisdom to choose peace when possible.